It's a pleasure to welcome Brian Palmer, a social anthropologist who's joining us kindly today at Researcher's Desk. Brian is public lecturer. He has a lot of experience in speaking with the public, and he's going to be talking with us about entertaining extinction, humor, and nuclear war. Brian, it's a real pleasure having you with us today at Researcher's Desk. The floor is yours. Welcome.
Thank you, Alasdair. A man named Tsutomu Yamaguchi was employed as a draftsman designing ships. On August 6, 1945, he happened to be on a work trip in Hiroshima. He was getting off a streetcar when the atomic bomb exploded. Yamaguchi suffered radiation burns over much of his body, lost his hearing in one ear, and was temporarily blinded. Though wounded, he was able to make his way to his home city, Nagasaki. There, on August 9th, he experienced the second nuclear explosion and again survived. Though more than 100 individuals were afflicted by both the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombings, Yamaguchi was Japan's first official double hibakusha, double atomic bomb survivor. Yamaguchi lost his wife and son to cancer and watched his daughters suffer lifelong illnesses. He himself died of stomach cancer at the age of 93 in January 2010. I know what you are probably thinking. This man would be the perfect person to joke about, right? Well, unbelievably enough, later that same year, that was the thought of comics in Britain at the BBC comedy program called QI. They debated on the air whether Yamaguchi was the unluckiest man in the world, having been a victim of 2 atomic blasts, or whether he was the luckiest man in the world because he survived both blasts. They joked that the bomb, quote, landed on him and bounced off, end quote, as if he were a cartoon character. Many commentators in Britain, Japan, and elsewhere, including one of Yamaguchi's daughters, denounced this episode of QI. The BBC quickly removed it from the web. I have mixed feelings. On the one hand, what a cavalier way to talk about Yamaguchi, who by all accounts was an extremely decent and indeed humble individual, not to mention a long-suffering one. On the other hand, the controversy around the jokes, more than the jokes themselves, led great numbers of people to learn about and reflect on Yamaguchi's fate, and thus on the reality of nuclear weapons. A few perhaps engaged with campaigns for nuclear disarmament, just as Yamaguchi himself had done. I have long been curious about whether and how the pleasures of humor can entice people to confront the thermonuclear peril that we all face. The issue of possible nuclear annihilation today is often forgotten and may feel unreal. To borrow Leonard Cohen's lyrics from a different context, the feel that this ain't exactly real, or it's real, but it ain't exactly there, end quote. In a recent guest lecture at a university in New York, many students in my audience didn't know that the United States still has nuclear weapons. I felt sorry to give them the bad news. It wasn't always like that. A few decades ago, when the world was younger than today, in Janice Ian's phrase, the global public was keenly aware of a possible nuclear annihilation. That awareness dissipated after the collapse of the Soviet Union. In 1986, 3 years before the fall of the Berlin Wall, a musical performer known as Weird Al Yankovic released a song called Christmas at Ground Zero. His producers chose not to invest in the project, so he made the accompanying music video himself, mixing clips of Christmas shoppers and duck and cover drills with a classic Yuletide tune. Quote, "It's Christmas at Ground Zero. There's music in the air. The sleigh bells are ringing and the carolers are singing while the air raid sirens blare. It's Christmas at Ground Zero. The button has been pressed. The radio just let us know that this is not a test. Everywhere the atom bombs are falling, are dropping. It's the end of all humanity. No more time for last minute shopping. It's time to face your final destiny." In the brief final scene of the music video, Yankovic and a chorus of small children stand singing as Christmas carolers in an apocalyptic landscape, actually filmed in the burnt out neighborhood of the South Bronx of New York. Radioactive fog wafts past. The children are wearing large World War II style gas masks, which muffle their voices as they sing. Yankovic, without a mask, leads them in the final verse of the song. Quote, "It's Christmas at Ground Zero. Now the missiles are on their way. What a crazy fluke. We're going to get nuked on this jolly holiday. What a crazy fluke. We're going to get nuked on this jolly holiday." The music video reportedly was played quite frequently on MTV music television in the late 1980s. To me, the final scene was masterful. The child carolers dutifully continuing the Christmas ritual, faithful in a world that has betrayed them. Almost a Greta Thunberg sentiment, conveyed with an absurd humor that weaves between the macabre and the compassionate. Let me play you that short clip if the technology allows here. Yankovic's song also epitomizes a common structure of humorous sketches about nuclear weapons. Nuclear war as a sudden and unexpected interruption of an intrusion upon everyday life. With minimal or no warning, catastrophe arrives out of the blue, raining down from the sky, a deus ex machina, intruding upon whatever we were concerned about at the moment. Humor may arise from the interplay between quotidian activity and the nuclear reality that barges in on the scene. The structure of interruption of ordinary life was found on bumper stickers and buttons in the 1980s. Quote, one nuclear bomb can ruin your whole day. Or nuclear war? What about my brilliant career? We can also note that the classic film Dr. Strangelove from 1963 likens nuclear war to interrupted sex, coitus interruptus. The American comedy program Saturday Night Live has used the interruption of the everyday in at least 2 sketches with a nuclear war theme. The more recent one was from 2017. 2 white boy rappers are eating at a fast food restaurant when a conventionally hot young woman, played by Gal Gadot, walks in and sits down at their table, eating their last French fry. Meanwhile, the restaurant's televisions, tuned to a news channel, report on a North Korean nuclear missile heading toward the city. Everyone is running around in panic mode, except the rappers who, uninterested in the news reports, insist on singing to the end their ridiculous song about how their new female acquaintance ate the last French fry. The sketch contains a measure of social criticism. The rappers are portrayed as self-absorbed, narcissistic, and uncurious, thereby oblivious to the world events unfolding before their eyes during the reign of President Trump. So I'll play that short sketch for you. Decades earlier, Saturday Night Live aired another sketch, which also involved continuing certain activities even after a nuclear war had intruded upon the scene. A nuclear bomb flattened New York City the day before. One sees that only one house, miraculously, is still standing, a small brownstone row house with a ground floor apartment inhabited by a single young man, and outdoor steps leading up to the main residence inhabited by a single young woman. The two run into each other outside. The man tries, apparently not for the first time, to get a sort of date with the woman. He asks if she would like to go gather some firewood with him. The woman curtly declines, saying that she has a busy schedule, and walks off. Here, the humor comes from the idea that this guy can't get a date even when he is the only other human being left alive in New York City. Nuclear war has changed everything except his longing for love and his inability to attain it. The interruption of daily life also shows up in the songs of Tom Lehrer, the mathematician and songwriter whose dazzling musical compositions drew inspiration from vaudeville performers of an earlier era. Lehrer's 1965 song, "So Long, Mom," takes the form of words spoken by a US pilot to his mother, with whom he still lives. The song conveys the warmth of the mother-son bond in the man's tone of address and anticipation of coming home from the war. And as our last clip, I'll play you that song.
You know, every great war produces...
Yankovic's Christmas video, the 2 Saturday Night Live sketches, and Lehrer's song all remind us that the daily lives of ourselves and people we care about are at every moment open to horrific interruption by nuclear weapons. This constant vulnerability is painful to think about, and we tend to put it out of our minds. Often we feel that it is best for our mental health to do so, not to dwell on such terrible eventualities. The feeling I can't go through my day worrying about such things. Humor and entertaining storytelling more generally entices us to keep the problem of nuclear weapons and nuclear devastation in our minds just a little longer than we otherwise would. This is a peculiar and rather unique capability of humor. In the words of the scholar Regina Barreca, quote, "Humor can be a shortcut, an eye-opener to get to the truth of the matter. When we can frame a difficult matter with humor, we can often reach someone who would otherwise withdraw," end quote. Reaching people who would otherwise withdraw does seem to be the main challenge, especially when dealing with an issue as unappealing as one's own annihilation and the potential extinction of our species. Here, even humor's evident power may feel too weak for the task. I'll leave things there so we can open up for questions. I see I went a little longer than the intended 20 minutes, but we still have an amount of time for questions, and comments and protests. So the floor is open.
Thank you very much indeed, Brian. That was a really excellent and thought-provoking talk.